Welcome to Jobbed Out, the wrestling editorial that reminds you things gotta be bad when you no-show a TV main event. You know, some good wrestling news would have to happen when I'm sick as hell. I'm gonna try to keep this short and to the point though. Tonight's WWE RAW was supposed to feature an all-women's main event 6-pack challenge, with the winner to become #1 contender for Bianca Belair's Raw Women's Championship. The participants were to include Doudrop, as well as former women's champions Nikki ASH, Becky Lynch, Asuka, Naomi, and Sasha Banks. Naomi and Banks, by the way, are the current WWE Women's Tag Team Champions as well, which should mean something, but as I brought up a long time ago in a video that I got called sexist for, unfortunately doesn't. Because the only time the WWE puts the women's tag titles into a story, it's because they want to pit two rival singles competitors against each other. According to Sean Ross Sapp, there's been tension all day behind the scenes as Banks and Naomi had voiced their displeasure with being in a 6-pack challenge for a singles title, and despite the format through the day reflecting a subject to change note, the match was still announced during the live Raw broadcast. After the announcement, Sasha Banks, followed by Naomi, went home, walking out during the show. Yeah, you can see why it's important enough to talk about despite being loaded on 6 different kinds of cold meds and half my equipment already packed so I can move into a new place this week. One of the 4 horsewomen of wrestling, Banks has combined for 10 singles and tag team championship reigns in the last 8 years. She made history at WrestleMania 37 alongside Bianca Belair, as the two were the first African American women to ever main event WrestleMania. Hell of a match too. Unfortunately, the most remembered part was a mistake that wasn't even their fault.
No way! It's a Banks! And a kick out by Sasha!
Between that, being Snoop Dogg's cousin, and being featured within a Star Wars universe, it's safe to say Banks is no stranger to success. But with that, Sasha Banks is also no stranger to walking out when she doesn't get her way. She walked out in 2019 citing depression and saying that she didn't know who she was anymore.
And I really lost myself because for a good 7 years, I didn't even hear my real name.
Hilariously, this was immediately after losing the WWE Women's Tag titles with then-partner Bayley. She rightfully objected to how the titles weren't being featured and were just thrown from one tag team to another basically for shock. She would return a few months later to resume her wrestling career, until August of 2021 when she and Belair both no-showed a string of events. While Belair would return immediately, Banks sat out for another 2 months prior to her most recent run. While not confirmed, a pair of rumors for the cause of Sasha's walkout have surfaced. First, Banks objecting to how McMahon continues refusing to put any effort into building the women's tag division, which, let's face it, is true. Even the champions themselves are just thrown together a couple weeks before WrestleMania so that Naomi and Sasha would have something to do. In that, they dethroned Carmella and Zelina Vega, who were paired together and became women's tag champions so that the performers would have something to do. The women's tag team titles only ever have 2 stories going. A singles women's champion and their #1 contender come together as part of their feud to win the titles almost accidentally, or a team of 2 singles gets thrown together and end up feuding with each other by the end of their reign. In Sasha's case, she's been part of both. The word was tonight it was Naomi who was supposed to win the match and become #1 contender, no doubt sparking the eventual breakup of the team. The second rumor, that Banks and Naomi objected to 2 of the participants and were uncomfortable working with them. I didn't think Nia Jax was in this thing, but oh well. The rumor would really take off as WWE themselves released a statement after the show, straight up calling Sasha Banks and Naomi out for going against the script and failing to fulfill their obligations. Monday Night Raw is a scripted live TV show whose characters are expected to perform the requirements of their contract. We regret we were unable to deliver, as advertised, tonight's main event. Said main event would be changed to Asuka vs Becky Lynch for the #1 contendership, which raises further eyebrows because why were Doudrop and Nikki ASH not included if they were to be a part of the original match? It's weird to me that WWE would put this kind of statement out, drawing attention to issues between performers and their employer, especially so soon after SmackDown competitor Toni Storm walked out on the company herself, got her release, and almost immediately jumped to the competition. As a fan of a TV show that always tries to blur the lines between script and reality, I can't pretend I'm not one of those fans who wonders if they're just working us. If this is part of a greater story to bring attention to a show during a lull period between Backlash and SummerSlam. But if this is true, then you also gotta wonder, what is the company supposed to do about it? Sasha Banks has walked away from her contractual obligations 3 times now. She's a big enough star that they should want to keep her. But since the WWE really wants to avoid having a star that's bigger than the company, as The Rock and Steve Austin were, the latter of which also notoriously walked out on the company once after disagreeing with their creative decisions, this puts the WWE in a tough spot. They could fire her and let her walk right into the competition. They could keep paying her to stay home and bury her name so that it loses value like they did with Pac. They may even be able to suspend her without pay so that she just can't wrestle anywhere, though like CM Punk when he walked out in 2014, that would not restrict her from, say, going back to working on The Mandalorian. Even if this is a work for storyline purposes, this just makes the WWE look undesirable to fans and future talents that may be iffy about signing with the company. Like the BBC with Jeremy Clarkson, the WWE's in a lose-lose situation here. Of course, we're not even talking about Naomi. With loads of WWE accolades herself on top of being a regular fixture on their Total Divas series, Naomi, like Belair before her, followed Sasha out the door. If anybody were to be punished here, it would be her. But for all we know, that's their goal. It wouldn't be the first time somebody intentionally tried to get themselves fired in order to get away from a bad job. So with that said, what do you think of this news about Sasha Banks and Naomi handing in their women's tag titles and walking out on the WWE during Monday Night Raw? Do you think they're just working the marks, or are they legitimately voicing their gripes in hopes for some change? Do you think punishments should be handed out, or do you want all parties to just resolve things quick so they can get back on TV and entertain the fans? Let me know what you think in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more, because I want you to be a part of this conversation too. For now though, I better get my shoulders off the mat. Let's be real, I better get some sleep. So I want to thank you for tuning in to Jobbed Out. I'll catch you next time.